Most people spend 40 years building their retirement, and then, quietly, without a single dramatic moment, it starts disappearing. Not because the market crashed, not because they made one catastrophic decision. It disappears slowly, invisibly, through 5 mistakes that almost nobody ever sees until it is too late. And here is what makes this so disturbing. These are not mistakes made by financially reckless people. They are mistakes made by careful, responsible, hardworking Americans who did everything they were told to do. They saved, they invested, they planned, and they still ended up with significantly less than they expected. An 84% failure rate. That is not a statistic from some fringe economic blog. That is a reflection of how deeply broken the current retirement system actually is. And if you think your account is immune, that is exactly what most people thought, right before things started going wrong. If this is your first time here, welcome to Metal Market Insight. We cover the financial realities that most channels do not want to talk about. If you're serious about protecting what you have built, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. Because what we are about to walk through could genuinely be the most important financial information you encounter this year. Let's start with mistake number 1. And it is the one that devastates accounts before most people even realize they are making it. There's a number that follows every retirement saver around like a shadow. Most people never look directly at it. They see their balance go up, they feel good, and they never stop to ask, what does this money actually buy? That number is called real purchasing power. And the gap between what your account says and what your money can actually do in the real world is one of the most dangerous traps in modern retirement planning. Here's how this plays out. Imagine someone who retired in 2000 with $800,000 in savings. By almost any traditional measure, that is a solid retirement. But between 2000 and 2024, the real cost of living in America increased by over 85%. Groceries, healthcare, housing, utilities, everything they needed to survive got dramatically more expensive. That $800,000 did not grow fast enough to keep pace. In real terms, their retirement wealth was cut nearly in half over 2 decades. They never received a single statement saying, your purchasing power dropped $40,000 this year. But it did, every single year, silently. This is what inflation does to retirement accounts. It does not make a sound. It does not show up as a loss. It just quietly erodes the real value of your savings while your account balance sits there looking perfectly fine. And right now in 2025, this problem is worse than it has been in 40 years. The Federal Reserve has spent years fighting an inflation wave unlike anything most modern retirees have ever experienced. Even with official inflation rates technically declining, cumulative price increases since 2020 have added up to a devastating 0.3% reduction in purchasing power for the average American household. That is money that is already gone, money that is never coming back. The retirees who understood this early did something different. They did not just measure their wealth in dollar amounts, they measured it in what those dollars could actually buy. And they structured part of their portfolio around assets that have historically held their value when paper money loses its. But that's only part of the story. Because mistake number 2 is something even more insidious. It hides inside something that is supposed to protect you. Most retirement investors believe that diversification means safety. And in theory, that is true. Spread your money across multiple assets, and when one goes down, the others hold steady. That is the idea. But here's where things get dangerous. Over the last 20 years, the definition of diversified has quietly changed, and not in your favor. Walk into any financial advisor's office today and show them a typical retirement portfolio. There is a very good chance it looks something like this: 60% in stocks, 30% in bonds, and 10% in some variation of real estate investment trusts or money market funds. That sounds balanced, that sounds diversified. But when you look beneath the surface, almost all of those assets move in the same direction during a real financial crisis. In 2008, stocks crashed, and bonds fell, and real estate collapsed. The entire so-called diversified portfolio moved together like a single investment. In 2022, the same thing happened again. Stocks and bonds both lost value simultaneously in one of the worst years for traditional portfolios in modern history. A classic 60-40 portfolio lost nearly 16% in a single calendar year. Most people have no idea this is possible. They were told bonds were the safe part. They were told that when stocks fall, bonds rise. But that relationship broke down, and millions of retirees saw the damage in their statements without fully understanding why their safe portfolio had failed them so completely. The reason this happens is correlation. When all your assets are denominated in the same currency, dependent on the same economic conditions, and regulated by the same government policies, they are far more connected than they appear on paper. True diversification means owning something that the system cannot easily control, devalue, or inflate away. And that is a concept we will come back to in just a moment. But first, mistake number 3. This one is personal. and it is costing American retirees an average of $11,000 per year. The number is not a typo, $11,000 per year. That is the average amount that hidden fees, fund expense ratios, advisor commissions, and account management costs are pulling out of retirement accounts across the country. The term hidden is the key word here, because most people never see these charges as a single line item. They are embedded inside the products themselves. They are expressed as percentages so small they seem irrelevant until you run the math. Here's a real-world example. Say you're 45 years old with $250,000 in a 401k. You're invested in a mutual fund with an expense ratio of 1.2%. That sounds like almost nothing. But over the next 20 years, assuming a 7% average annual return, that 1.2% fee difference compared to a low-cost index fund will cost you over $117,000 in lost retirement wealth. Not because the market did something wrong, not because of any financial crisis, simply because of a fee that you barely noticed, buried inside a product you were told was working for you. And that is only the fund expenses. Layer in advisor fees, account maintenance charges, transaction costs, and surrender charges on annuities. And the total picture becomes genuinely alarming. The financial industry is extraordinarily good at presenting small percentages that feel harmless in isolation, but compound into enormous damage over time. The mathematical reality is simple and brutal. Every dollar that leaves your account in fees is a dollar that can never compound for your future. And the people who discovered this early, who moved aggressively toward low-cost structures and held assets outside the fee-heavy financial system, kept dramatically more of their wealth over time. But here is what nobody's talking about when it comes to fees. The fee problem is about to get significantly worse. New regulatory shifts, changing advisor compensation models, and the explosion of complex financial products being marketed specifically to retirees are creating a new era of fee extraction. Products that promise protection, guaranteed income, and downside defense often carry annual costs that can reach 3% or higher. And in a world where real returns may be more modest going forward, paying 3% in fees to get 5% in returns is a very different equation than it appears. This changes everything about how you need to think about where your money lives. Which brings us to mistake number 4, the one that is entirely invisible until it is too late. Most people think about taxes when they file their return. They do not think about taxes as a retirement strategy. And that distinction, and that one mindset difference, is quietly destroying the long-term wealth of millions of Americans who did everything else right. Here's the scenario that plays out over and over again. Someone spends 30 years faithfully contributing to their traditional 401k. They take the tax deduction every year. They watch the balance grow. They feel genuinely good about what they have built. And then they retire, and they start taking distributions, and for the first time they truly understand what they agreed to. Every single dollar they withdraw is taxed as ordinary income, not at capital gains rates, ordinary income rates, which in many cases is significantly higher. Now layer in Social Security taxation rules. If your combined income, including 401k withdrawals, pension income, and half of your Social Security benefit, exceeds $44,000 as a married couple, up to 85% of your Social Security benefit becomes taxable. That is not a penalty. That is just how the rules work. And most people sitting in front of their advisor at age 55 have no idea this is coming. Then at age 73, the government steps in with required minimum distributions. Whether you need the money or not, the IRS requires you to begin withdrawing from your tax-deferred accounts and paying taxes on every dollar. These mandatory withdrawals can push retirees into higher tax brackets, triggering taxation cascades that ripple through their entire financial picture. Social Security gets taxed more. Medicare premiums go up. Net wealth shrinks faster than projected. The cumulative tax damage to a poorly structured retirement can easily represent 6 figures of lost wealth over a 20-year retirement period. 6 figures. That is the price of not understanding the tax implications of where your money is held. And right now, with federal debt levels exceeding $36 trillion and growing, the risk that future tax rates rise significantly is real. History suggests that when governments face enormous debt burdens, they look for revenue. And tax-deferred retirement accounts represent an enormous pool of money that has never been taxed. That alone would be bad enough. But it gets worse. Mistake number 5 is the one that almost nobody sees coming, and it is the mistake that in many ways makes all the other ones more dangerous. It is the false sense of time. Retirement planning is built on projections, 40 years of contributions, 70 years of living expenses, estimated returns of 7%, average inflation of 2.5%. Everything is a straight line, a clean projection that assumes the future will look something like the past. And for long stretches of financial history, that assumption worked reasonably well. But we are living through something different right now. The economic environment that shaped traditional retirement projections no longer fully exists. Interest rates spent 15 years near zero and then spiked dramatically. Bond yields that were supposed to provide income provided almost nothing for a decade, and then caused massive losses when rates rose. The stock market, by almost every valuation measure, is priced at levels that historically produce significantly below average forward returns. And the geopolitical landscape, trade tensions, tariff conflicts, currency wars, central bank credibility concerns, adds layers of uncertainty that straight-line projections are completely unable to account for. Here is the real danger of the false sense of time. It makes people comfortable when they should be alert. It makes people passive when they should be active. The person who tells themselves, "I have 20 more years to fix this," is the most vulnerable person in the room. Because the math of compounding works brutally in reverse when the foundation of your retirement plan is built on assumptions that are no longer reliable. Now consider what this looks like in practice. Take a 58-year-old couple. Between their two 401ks, they have $620,000 saved. They are planning to retire at 65 on about $52,000 per year from their accounts combined with Social Security. That sounds reasonable on the surface. But when you account for realistic inflation over the next 25 years, not the official target rate, but the real experienced inflation on healthcare, housing, and food, their purchasing power erodes to roughly $28,000 in today's terms by their early 80s. That is a $24,000 per year gap between what they think they will have and what they will actually be able to buy. That gap is not theoretical. That gap is the difference between comfort and financial stress in the final chapter of their lives. So, what do the people who avoid these 5 mistakes actually do differently? This is where it gets important. They do not ignore the system, but they do not trust it blindly either. They understand that paper assets, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, carry real systemic risks that are not always visible in a bull market. They build portfolios that include assets with genuine independence from the financial system, assets that are not one government policy away from losing their value, assets that have protected purchasing power across centuries of monetary history, not just decades of modern finance. Physical gold and silver have served that function for thousands of years, not as a retirement replacement, not as a get-rich-quick strategy, but as a genuine store of value, a hedge against the exact risks: currency devaluation, inflation, banking instability, geopolitical uncertainty that are threatening retirement accounts right now. Central banks around the world understand this. In 2023 and 2024, global central bank gold purchases hit the highest levels ever recorded. That is not an accident. That is sophisticated institutional money recognizing a shift in how reliable traditional financial assets are. In 2025, with gold repeatedly testing and breaking through record price levels, with silver demand being driven by both investment and industrial necessity, and with the broader economic picture remaining genuinely uncertain, the question is not whether precious metals have a role to play in a retirement portfolio. The question is how much exposure makes sense given the specific risks each person faces. And here's the thing. The people who protect their retirement accounts best are not the people who panic and make dramatic moves. They are the people who quietly, systematically, and intelligently structure their wealth across assets that cannot all be destroyed by the same force at the same time. The 5 mistakes we walked through today, inflation erosion, false diversification, hidden fees, a tax blindness, and the false sense of time, are not inevitable. They are not the unavoidable price of living in an imperfect financial system. They are completely avoidable, but only if you see them clearly. Only if you're willing to look honestly at what your retirement actually looks like versus what it is supposed to look like. The math simply does not work if you keep doing the same things and expect different results. The environment has changed. The risks are different. The tools available to protect your wealth include things that most traditional advisors are never incentivized to discuss. So here is what I want you to do. Sit down this week and honestly look at your retirement portfolio. Ask yourself how much of it is genuinely protected from inflation. Ask how correlated your assets actually are when markets get stressed. Ask what you're actually paying in total fees across every account you hold. Ask what your real after-tax retirement income will look like. And ask yourself whether your plan is built on assumptions about the future that might no longer be accurate. These are not comfortable questions, but they are the questions that separate the people who retire with confidence from the people who spend their retirement years constantly worried about whether the money will last. Drop a comment below and tell me, which of these 5 mistakes concerns you the most? Are you worried about the tax time bomb inside your 401k? Are you questioning whether your portfolio is truly diversified? Or are you concerned about what inflation is quietly doing to your purchasing power right now? I read every comment, and your question might become our next video. If this gave you something to think about, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're not subscribed yet, now is the time. We cover the financial realities that most people discover too late. And our goal is to make sure you are always ahead of the curve, not behind it. Until next time, stay sharp, protect what you have built, and keep asking the questions that matter.